Holy Spider-Man pointing meme, everyone! Not to be hyperbolic, but Across the Spider-Verse might just be the best looking animated film of all time, and I think it's more than a worthy follow-up to Into the Spider-Verse. Will this be the greatest superhero trilogy ever? Who knows, but it's almost certainly the best multiverse story. Not surprisingly, it revealed a crazy amount of information about the multiverse that changes everything we thought we knew. Let's discuss the wildest implications right now. Hey, just an FYI, there will be spoilers for Across the Spider-Verse, so let's make sure we've all seen the movie before continuing, okay? Unless you're one of those people who want to watch this video first before going to the theater, and to that I say, who are you and why? I'd love to hear why. Anyways, are you still busy picking up the bits of brain on the floor from your mind being completely blown by Across the Spider-Verse? I know I am. My theater was basically just a big brain gumbo slushy because I think everyone in the theater lost their minds over this film, and rightfully so. I know we don't like to throw around the word masterpiece too often or else it loses some of its meaning, but this film is a visual masterpiece. I don't think that's up for debate. Like, I think the order of the undeniable list of pretty things on Earth to look at just got completely reshuffled, because now it goes number 1, the Aurora Borealis, number 2, the Nicole Kidman AMC ad, and number 3 is now Across the Spider-Verse, narrowly edging out a panda in a funny hat eating bamboo. I can't wait to see what my saintly video editor does with those items. Anyways, more than just being a delicious feast for the eyes for every frame and every second, let's not overlook the fact that Across the Spider-Verse revealed a ton of surprising information about the multiverse that has major ramifications, and it did so in engaging and interesting ways. I'm going to be talking about everything in Across the Spider-Verse, including canon events, anomalies, and what franchise tells the ultimate multiverse story. But first, I want to talk about connection. I think a whole theme of this franchise is the idea of connection. It's about thousands of spider people who feel alone in their own universe and suddenly find that they aren't an island by themselves. It's why it's so gratifying to see them introduce themselves as the one and only Spider-Man and then meet up with each other, proving they aren't the one and only. It means you don't have to go through this life alone, no matter how different and isolated you feel, which is just a great message. But of course, connection in the Spider-Verse movies means more than just regular connections between everyday people. I'm talking about how Across the Spider-Verse connects almost every Spider-Man franchise and Marvel superhero universe into one giant web. We knew from the trailer of Across the Spider-Verse that Miguel would reference the MCU. He bashes Doctor Strange and the nerd from Earth 1999-99. And if you're thinking to yourself, hey, why is it called Earth 1999-99 instead of Earth 616 like the MCU calls it? Well, just know I made a whole other video about that and darn near lost my mind. But for those thinking that the throwaway crowd-pleasing trailer line would be it in terms of MCU references, then oh boy were you mistaken. Big time. And yes, let's get it out of the way that Tom Holland himself did not appear. At least I don't think he did. I didn't see his picture in any of the big webs, but admittedly there were a lot of webs, and as I mentioned, I was busy picking my brain off the sticky theater floor, so if I missed him, please let me know when. On the multiple rewatches I'm going to do of this movie, I would love to know where to look. But even though the official MCU Spidey did not appear, there were a surprising amount of live action cameos that relate to Tom Holland and the MCU. Probably the closest connection and the biggest surprise was Donald Glover's return as Aaron Davis, aka the Prowler, aka the guy who had ice cream in his trunk in Homecoming. That was definitely the most unexpected cameo, but a welcome one. Hopefully he gets sent back to his universe soon in order to fight Tom Holland in Spider-Man 4. But besides Donald Glover, we got quick clips of the other live-action Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. And in case you forgot that this was a Sony movie and they're still trying to make the Sony-verse a major thing, we also jumped to Venom's universe when the Spot had a conversation with Mrs. Chen. I don't know what would have been better. It would have been great to actually see Tom Hardy's Venom, but having the Spot have a normal conversation with the unfazed Mrs. Chen was pretty hilarious. But the truly great thing about Across the Spider-Verse is that it connected more than just the live-action franchises. It went animated as well. We saw the Lego version of Spider-Man along with the Spectacular Spider-Man from the stellar Spectacular Spider-Man TV show, which I highly recommend if you haven't seen it. Seriously, that show is great. We also had the Insomniac Games version of Spider-Man, which is a fun cross-platform reference, and of course, a lot of comic panels of Spider-Man classic comics, which was awesome. Again, there was was a lot to keep track of, but I don't think I saw references to Spider-Man the Animated Series or the Japanese series Spider-Man, which is either a rights issue or a surprise I'm hoping to see in Beyond the Spider-Verse. But if you saw them, let me know. Either way, at the end of the day, this film united the multiverse in a huge way, tying together all sorts of spider people from all corners of the universe, which is incredibly impressive and tells us how big the multiverse really is. Next, let's talk about canon events, which were introduced in Across the Spider-Verse. In the MCU's big multiversal stories like Loki, we've gotten the concept of Nexus events, and in the What If MCU show, we've heard about absolute points. So how do all of these compare and contrast to each other? Loki taught us that Nexus events were moments that deviated from the sacred timeline, while absolute points were described as events that could not be changed no matter what, with the big example shown being Christine Palmer's demise. Canon events are introduced in this new film, and Miguel describes them as moments or actions that must happen to certain Spider-Men or else whole universes are at risk. So it's more closely related to absolute points than Nexus events, and ultimately I think has the goal of driving people like me who try to keep track of this stuff insane. So that's fun. Sure, maybe I shouldn't care so much, but the What If show went unnecessarily out of its way to be sort of canon with the MCU, and now that the MCU is clearly part of this Spider-Verse, then that means the concept of absolute points are in play. But I like calling them canon events more, because that's a fun meta nod to the idea of what is canon or not in this franchise and in our superhero content overall. It's a clever piece of writing. This whole movie is clever, but the question becomes just how important is Spider-Man to the overall safety of the multiverse? I think Across the Spider-Verse focused the idea on canon events as events that must happen to certain Spider-Man. It was the idea that something bad had to happen to someone close in Spider-Man's life. For most, it was Uncle Ben. For others, it's the police chief. Sometimes it was both of them. I'm not sure how it's decided, but there are certain people who have to perish in order for the universe to survive. We saw that with Spider-Man India in Across the Spider-Verse. That Spider-Man didn't know it, but he was put in a situation where he could either save his beloved or her police chief father. Miguel and his Spider Society were just gonna let this happen, with the police chief ultimately biting the dust. But Miles, of course, steps in and saves the day. And while it's a cheerful moment, it's suddenly upended by Spider Society's members descending on the universe in an attempt to save it. Because the police chief didn't perish, everything is in danger. We're left with them telling us they will try their best to save the universe with their fancy machines and whatever devices they were using, but they weren't sure if that universe was doomed or not. Hope they answer that question in the sequel. Anyways, it establishes that these canon events, which directly relate to Spidey, are some of the most important universal events for that particular universe. Do you think Aunt May getting Green Goblined to death was Tom Holland's canon event? Or maybe Tony Stark was a canon event? If that's the case, then that frames the whole MCU around Spider-Man. Is that a good or bad thing, you think? And now I just have the question, can canon events be broken? Maybe not, but we've seen that there are workarounds. In Across the Spider-Verse, it's stated that the police captain's life is in danger, and that's especially hard for Gwen, who has a strained relationship with her father. But when she returns to him and makes amends near the end of the movie, she realizes that he's basically broken the cycle by quitting the job. This raises some major questions. Does the police captain still have to die in that universe? What if Spider-Gwen or any Spider person who knew that the police captain had to die enacted total social change and abolished the police captain role altogether? Does that negate a canon event, or would something else happen? I just don't think that even though Miles' dad is the captain, the franchise is going to end his life now. Maybe if it wasn't a cliffhanger, then maybe, but now I don't think they would tease us with a way to save him only to off him a year later. So we are left to wonder not only if you can break a canon event, but also what are the overall ramifications besides total universe wipe? As we discuss the big issues with breaking canon events, let's talk about another big no-no that Across the Spider-Verse introduced. It's the idea of existing in a different universe. We've seen the trouble with this in the previous movie. It seems like whenever you're in a universe that you don't belong in, your atoms start to freak out and it causes a total multiversal glitch. And Miguel invented something that would fix this. It's kind of like a very sensitive watch that keeps your atoms in place through some type of magic-y science mumbo-jumbo that the movie sort sort of glosses over. But hey, they're spider people. They can do anything. Anyways, turns out just finding a way to get your atoms in check doesn't always mean a happy ending, and is actually much worse in the long run. As we're told in the film, Miguel lost his own daughter in his universe and then finds another universe where that version of Miguel O'Hara died so he could slide in and take his place. Nice and clean, right? Well, actually no. Turns out you can't just swap universes for an extended period of time, as Miguel inadvertently caused that whole universe to collapse just by apparently him being there. He tried to fix what seemed like a canon event and didn't let things play out naturally. Instead, he tried to fix everything and potentially billions of lives were lost. Whoops. So being in another universe has potentially disastrous consequences if you stay there a long time. And why do I bring that up? Because Across the Spider-Verse ends with Miles trapped in a different universe that's not his own. And although this version of New York City doesn't necessarily look great with all the fires, the Sinister Six running around, and Miles breaking bad with his Uncle Aaron, I don't think anyone wants to see it destroyed. I know Miles technically probably won't be in that universe very long, since the Spot is on his way to take out Miles' dad in his own universe, so maybe this isn't important to consider. But I'm wondering if we're going to get more of an explanation of what happens when you're in a different universe for an extended period of time. Because although Miguel says he caused the collapse of that other universe by being in it too long, we know that from What If, the Watcher allowed that other version of Black Widow to stay in a different universe, so what gives? The answer, of course, is hey, shut up about What If, which I guess I'm gonna have to do, right? Is it really all connected or not? Across the Spider-Verse also officially revealed that Miles was the original Anomaly, and his very being is causing things to go a bit haywire. As I, and a lot of others suspected, the spider that bit Miles was not from our universe. It was a spider that was transported from somewhere else. Miles was bitten, and it inadvertently led to Miles' Chris Pine-sounding Spider-Man to die by saving Miles instead of stopping the Super Collider, and eventually broke the multiverse. It directly challenges the very idea put forward in the first film. Into the Spider-Verse told us repeatedly that anyone could wear the mask, but this new film expands on that, saying, yeah, anyone can wear the mask, but not if the spider that bites you is actually from a different universe and it was meant for someone else. You know, I was partially expecting it to be revealed that the spider that bit Miles was actually from the universe where that other version of Miguel dies, hence giving a reason why he dies and thus creating a strong connection between Miles and evil Miguel, but I don't think that's the case. My original theory before the film came out was that the spider that bit Miles was actually meant for Miguel's child, and it jumping universes and biting Miles led to the child not surviving, but this movie sort of disproves that. I'm thinking we're in for a bigger reveal on who that spider was meant for in the next movie, so let's stay tuned for that. Anyways, Miles is the original Anomaly, and although that's presented as a bad thing in the movie, I think it will ultimately save the day. The fact of the matter is, these spider people have lost their way. Most of them are fine with the idea of letting innocent people die in order to save millions of lives, and while that's logical, it doesn't sound like Spider-Man, right? I think it's going to take an Anomaly like Miles to convince them to do the right thing. It also overall presents the idea in the multiverse that if something from one universe directly affects something in another universe, then bad things could happen. So wait, does that mean that the different universe Green Goblin we saw in No Way Home who killed Aunt May is an event that wasn't supposed to happen in the original timeline? Will there be repercussions to this? I mean, probably not, but it would be cool if there were. And finally, do you know what else that Across the Spider-Verse revealed about the multiverse? That the Spider-Verse franchise is the superior multiverse story. This last entry isn't really fact-based, but rather more of my opinion, but I think if you truly analyze the big multiversal stories that we've been seeing recently, it's clear that this Spider-Verse franchise has the best handle on it. Let's look at the MCU first. Do I think the MCU is doing a good job with its multiverse story? Sorry, but I don't. As the MCU tries to juggle multiversal stories and things like Loki, Multiverse of Madness, No Way Home, and Quantumania, one thing that has become clear is that it's a little confusing, contradictory, and I'm having trouble being truly invested in it. Yes, it's still early Phase 5 and we have some time before Secret Wars, but the MCU hasn't done a great job in selling me on the benefit of the multiverse. Like right now, if I could only pick one franchise between the MCU or the Spider-Verse franchise to continue continue its multiversal story, I would pick Spider-Verse in a heartbeat. Maybe I was just turned off completely by Quantumania, but I'm really struggling to see the game plan for how the MCU is going to tie everything together. The reason I think the Spider-Verse franchise is working so well is because it's rooted in character. We actually feel the stakes here. Yes, it is part one of a two-part story, but I really respected how even though the movie was called Across the Spider-Verse, we really didn't see any multiversal travel for well over half the movie. The time was spent establishing the relationship between Miles and his parents, which made the stakes that much higher. I see the criticism all the time for the MCU as death doesn't mean anything anymore because the multiverse just has a different universe. And while I do think that's a problem for the MCU, I don't think Spider-Verse suffers from that because we're so invested in Miles and Gwen and Peter B. Parker. This is multiverse content done right. So it's better than the MCU, and now the big question becomes, will it be better than DC's multiverse with the Flash film? I mean, it's gotta be, right? What do you think? How do you think Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to end? Anything you want to see in the next film? I mean, besides the full return of Spider-Man Noir, of course, that's a given. Well, I think I'm going to watch Across the Spider-Verse again. Well, first I'll rewatch Into the Spider-Verse, then rewatch Across the Spider-Verse. Man, this is a great franchise. Thanks for watching.